Okay, so on to a new pasuk. Hold on just one second. Okay, so Mishlei 10:15, Yud Tes Vav. Hon Ashir Kiryas Uzo, Mechitas Dalim Resham. Not the easiest pasuk to translate. Anyone want to give it a shot? This one I'll be more forgiving if no one wants to give it a shot. Yeah, go ahead.
The treasure of a wealthy person is the fortress of his strength.
Okay. I'll go with that. The treasure of a wealthy person, not healthy, wealthy person is the fortress of his strength. I know how you know that. We'll talk about that later. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't remember what chitas means.
So chita, anyone know what chita is? So it's a weird word for weird synonym for a common word.
Didn't we have that last time?
I don't think so.
Like destruction or something.
Oh, that's mechita. Yeah. This is so I see how you get things the same word because it looks and sounds the same. So oh, hold on just one second here. Just one second. Wait, now you got me curious. I just have to look up the puzzle we did last time. Did it use the same word? Hold on.
I don't know. I definitely remember a word like that somewhere.
Yeah, no. Now you got me thinking about it. Okay, so the last puzzle we did said.
I think we did one.
Oh yeah, it was last pasuk. It was
Yeah, mechita. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so weird. Okay, and the reason why I'm saying it's okay. Yeah. It's so weird. Okay, anyway. Yeah, you're right. I don't know what I was thinking. For some reason, I thought this meant something else. All right, now I'm second guessing myself. I thought it meant fear, but it means destruction. Yeah. So the destruction of the poor. Oh, sorry. Is that how you're going to translate it, Isaac?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there poverty?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to translate it as that, and then I was like, wait, am I like conflating two words that don't mean?
Yep. Nope. That's it. That's definitely it. So let's just do our usual routine and go through the translations here. I don't think there's going to be much time that we're going to spend in the translations here. First, I just want to note that Isaac translated "hone" as treasure. I feel like that's accurate, but treasure has like different connotations in English. Like it has like a little bit of a pirate connotation, a little bit of a like a precious gems. So let's go with hone. Let's go with fortune. Okay, because it means like a lot of wealth. Okay, so the fortune of a wealthy person is the fortress of his strength. The destruction of the poor is their poverty. Okay, so let's look at the translations. Yeah.
You mean fortune strictly in the wealth sense, not in the chance sense, right?
Yeah. Like Fortune 500. Okay. Mitsuas Sion says Kirya is Miloshan Kirya Ve'ir. So he says it is a fortress, a fortified city. Okay. So you could say fortress, you could say fortified city. I'll say, I'll just add it in brackets. Okay. Fine. Okay. So that's not really going to change the meaning so much. And then Reish, so he translates it the way Isaac did, which is the poor, like, is poverty. It seems to be unclear whether it is poverty or impoverishment. Okay. The difference being, are we talking about a person who just is poor or a person who became poor? Like they used to be wealthy or like not poor and then they became poor. So Mitsuya Sion is saying it's poverty, but others say it means like Malbim, I think, says it means impoverishment. So let's just keep that flexible there. Okay, Sadigon, I didn't understand what Sadigon's doing here. He says Kamosha hon ha'osher ha'ashir hu kiryas uzo umichitas hadalim hu resham. It's like an incomplete sentence. It's possible that he attaches it to the next pasuk, so let's just ignore that. And then the Targum does a few little weird things. So he says, Kinyana da'atira kraka de ushne. So the possessions of the wealthy person are the fortress of his strength. And by the way, those who the reason why Isaac knew how to translate the first half of this pasuk is because we did this in our morning Mishlei shiur. We did a pasuk that has exactly the same first half. But the weird thing, Isaac, is he translated it in 1810 as mazla, which is fortune. Here he translates it as possessions. So it's a different translation.
Wow,
I-
that's interesting.
yeah, I don't know why, but so I'm just translating it straight here. The possessions of the wealthy person are are the fortress of his strength. The Shetzia de Miskana, and the destruction of the poor is Srichusahon, is their needs. Okay, so there's a fine line between needs and poverty, but so I like here, let's look at the English translations. Art Scroll says a rich man's wealth is his citadel of strength. So citadel is a nice word for fortress city, but since it's not used so commonly, then I don't like it so much. But poverty is the ruin of the impoverished. Okay, so they translate mechita as ruin. Let's do that also, because that's a nice word. All right, and they also say impoverished. Living Knox says the rich man's wealth is his fortress. The poverty of the destitute is their ruin. Okay, so hold on just a second here. Yeah, that's interesting. Hold on, how do I go do it? Yeah, you see the difference between you see the syntactical move that Art Scroll is making. They're changing the order of the second half to make it line up with the first half. They're saying the wealth, essentially the wealth of the wealthy person is his fortress of strength, and the poverty of the poor person is their destruction, which is not wrong, but you look at the way that our pasuk has it. It's almost like a pattern, that the wealth of the fortune of the wealthy person is his fortress of strength, and then it doesn't talk about the wealth level. It says the destruction of the poor person is their poverty. So it's these translations did not preserve it, but Alter does. Alter likes preserving stuff like that. So he says, the rich man's wealth is his fortress city. The disaster of the poor is their privation. I don't know where he gets disaster from. So let's eliminate that there. And yeah, okay, so I think that's all it in terms of the translations. Any just straight up translation questions before we move on to questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you say the difference was in terms of syntax between our translation and our school's translation?
Yeah, so the way we're doing it is or the way I translated it is I kept the order of the words in the pasuk. So Hon Ashir, the wealth of the wealthy person, Kiryas Uzo is the fortress of his strength, Umechitas, and the destruction, Dalim, of the poor, Resham, is their poverty. Okay. Art Scroll says the rich man's wealth is the citadel of his strength, but the poverty of the ruin is the impoverished. So the Art Scroll, so in other words, my translation goes ABBA. Art Scrolls goes ABAB. His wealth is this, his poverty is that. That's how Art Scroll does it. Ours is his wealth is this, and for the rich person, and the destruction is their level of wealth for the poor person. I'm not saying that necessarily matters. It's just that I noticed it in the reading of the pasuk.
In your experience, would you say there's I guess a preference in?
I mean, I'd say that we had a string of pesukim earlier on that in chapter 10 that could be read both ways. Let me actually just go to that for a second, just to refresh our memory. It's been a long winter. So we had, for example, early on, Rosh Ose Kaf Ramia, that you could translate as a poor person makes a deceitful scale, or a deceitful scale makes someone a poor person, and you could read it both ways. So it's something that Shlomo will often do, which he'll use ambiguous syntax so that the pasuk will be read in two ways. So same thing here. This one's a little bit more subtle. Here is the destruction of the poor is their poverty. Okay, that's very different than saying that the poverty of the poor person is their destruction. So I like. So I guess in terms of your question, is there a preference? Preserving the ambiguities when possible, I think, is a good move, because Shlomo HaMelech knew how to write, but he will incorporate deliberate ambiguities so that you can read the pasuk both ways. Okay.
So can we leave that up there? That translation?
The Art Scroll one?
Yeah, the ABAB
Yeah,
one.
sure. Yeah.
I kind of like that way of reading it.
Yeah. So you know what? I'll leave Art Scroll and Alter here because it shows the patterns. Okay, so what are the questions and problems here?
Can I ask a general question?
Yeah.
It's not really specific to this pasuk, but this
Sure.
pasuk started a line of thinking.
Mhm.
This reminds me of I guess the proverb from Pirkei Avos, which is like, who is a rich man, one who is happy with his lot. So it
Yeah.
just seemed very similar to me.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking, which is that in general, I feel like there's a lot of similarities between Pirkei Avos and like the ideas in Mishlei and like
Yeah.
teaching a person how to live and stuff.
Yeah.
And it made me wonder, like, wasn't Pirkei Avos only written down after Rabbi Yehuda like allowed the the oral law to be written? Meaning
Yeah.
meaning before that there was something about Pirkei Avos that wasn't supposed to be written down, but this was written down beforehand. So
Right.
there should be like an inherent clear difference between the messages here and the messages in Pirkei Avos, and I'm curious as to what that is.
Yeah. So the short answer to that, there are varying lengths of answers to that. Sorry, I just saw the chat from Leah there. Sorry. The short answer is this is okay. This is my approach to Pirkei Avos. So there's a Gemara that says someone who wants to be a chassid should fulfill the words of Avos. And chassid is not talking about like the Hasidic movement. It means someone who wants to go beyond the letter of the law. And in terms of the you know what, let me just pull this up. Hold on just a second. I don't want to go into this in depth, but it's a good enough methodology question that that I want to comment on it. Hold on just a second here. It's going to be a callback that some of my students are going to remember here. Give me 1 second. Oh, you know what? I actually don't want to reveal the entire thing. Okay, so let me just share what I have here. Okay, so this is what I call the Mishleic spectrum. Okay, and this is not a comprehensive one, but these are like the personality types of Mishlei. And I actually I have an article where I like give elementary definitions of each of them. So you can see here from the spectrum that so in the middle you have the neutral personality. Yellow is developing through Chachma, and then green is the highest levels within Mishlei. And then on the other side you have orange is devolving through foolishness, and then the red is you have the worst lowest levels in Mishlei. But you see that there's a dividing line that the Chassid is beyond Mishlei. Okay, now the two works that deal with what a Chassid are. The two works are Tehillim, which deals with a chassid from the standpoint of your relationship with God, and then Pirkei Avos deals with a chassid in terms of your ethics. And there's obviously an overlap between the two, you know. But Mishlei, there's no pasuk in Mishlei that uses the word chassid, and there are only, I think, 3 pesukim that even use the word chesed. And the reason why, so Pirkei Avos is written for someone who is like a tzaddik and is trying to become a chassid. And Mishlei is written primarily for the Na'ar, the Chacham, the Pesi, the Na'ar, the Chacham, and the Navon, and who are trying to become tzaddikim. Okay, so just in terms of answering the question the way that Zach asked it, is Mishlei is for general audiences. Pirkei Avos is designed specifically for people who are tzaddikim, who are trying to reach the ultimate level, the level beyond tzaddikim. And it's not that Pirkei Avos is irrelevant for people like us. In fact, those who are in I give a Pirkei Avos class 2 weeks, 2 weeks a day, 2 days a week, and you know they're available on YouTube. And you'll notice that one of the questions we always ask is, to what extent is this just for the person who's becoming a chassid, and to what extent is this applicable to us? But the point is that it's a much finer, like case by case basis for applying the teachings of Pirkei Avos than Mishlei. Like Mishlei, you're going to be good if you apply the ideas no matter what. Even if we say that it's like intended for a certain audience, it's a much broader audience. Whereas there's certain things in Pirkei Avos where if you applied them and you weren't on the level to apply them, it would actually like stunt your development, you know? So that might be a reason why Pirkei Avos was not written down, in the same way that Mishlei was.
Thank you. That was a very good answer for my
Okay, good.
thinking.
And then I
Appreciate it.
have to
wondering-
plug before we ask the question. I just have to plug the because this came up in my Stoic Jew podcast today. So I did an episode on what is George Washington a Stoic, and the question that we deal with, I won't reveal the answer, was he a Mishleic Stoic or a Pirkei Avos Stoic? That was actually the question that I dealt with. And also in the episode, I just have to like mention it just to get people to check it out, is I found a letter by Thomas Jefferson where he talks about Pirkei Avos. Interesting stuff. If you're interested, then check out that episode on the Stoic Jew podcast. But anyway, yeah, was that Naomi who was going to ask a question?
I was just curious if you have an example of how the Pirkei Avos can stunt the person's growth.
Yeah. So my go-to example is actually the example where I first saw it, which is there is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says "Aseh Torascha keva." You should make your Torah a fixture or permanent. Okay, so Rashi on Pirkei Avos there. So Rambam interprets it, or Rambam and many others interpret it in actually I forgot it was Rambam. Maybe it was Avadim Bar. The standard interpretation is okay. Scratch that, start over. Let me just tell you the Rashi. Okay, Rashi says on that Mishnah, don't make set times for your Torah learning. Rather, you should learn all the time. Okay, now the reason why that is could be disastrous is if you look at the actual halachos of learning Torah, the basic halacha is you should be kovei itim the Torah, is that you should establish specific times in your day that you learn, because that's the best way to start the habit, So if a person read that Rashi and it said, don't set times for Torah, just try to do Torah all the time, and the person thought it was talking to them, so then it would really actually like hold them back from their growth. In fact, that's like a problem in a lot of yeshiva cultures now, where like kids feel like they have to be learning all the time, and then it like ruins the relationship to learning, And what Rashi is talking about is he's saying, if you are a person who has already progressed to the point where you have established times for Torah, and you could be filling in your free time with Torah learning and you're not, then there's something wrong with your relationship with the Torah, and you're like treating it as like an obligation, or there's something that needs to be worked out there, So when I first saw that Rashi, I was shocked, because he's literally telling you to not do something that halakha tells you to do, But that's because he's trying to push you beyond the letter of the law.
Where was that, Rashi?
It's on whichever Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says Aseh Torascha keva. I don't even remember which parak it's in.
114 or 15.
114. Okay, yeah.
That's interesting. Just like a side question on that. Sorry.
Well, okay.
Do you think if it was like a Rashi on Chumash, he would have said it in a different way? Meaning, like, it's almost like because Pirkei Avos is for a specific type of person, like he's catering to a different audience. Like, I'm just wondering now. Like, it just got me thinking. Like, would he?
So that gets into the question of. I would agree with you if he was a Rashi on Gemara. Okay, but it gets into the question of who Rashi on Chumash was intended for, and that's not a simple thing. I think everyone like just assumes Rashi wrote for like all of the Jews in Klal Yisrael, but I'm not so sure. And that gets into the question of is Rashi intended to be pshat or not, and like what is he doing? I don't even have like views on that, but I do know that that's a question. So I don't answer your questions. I don't know.
It's a good answer.
Yeah. Okay, so that was from Zach, and then this back to this. I'm just trying to think if I missed anything. Oh, Naomi, did that answer your question about an example?
Yeah, good.
Okay. All right, so let's get back to our pasuk now. Good detour. Okay, questions.
So I know this probably isn't like the first question.
Yeah.
Like this seems like it could only be advice for either someone who's wealthy or someone who's poor. Like you can't really control that. So how is it saying? Yeah, like it seems like it's out of your control.
Okay, so
and not good or bad, just neutral.
Okay, good. So so if wealth and poverty are not within a person's control, who is this pasuk for? Okay, or you know what? I'm gonna ask that part of the question first. Let's just do this. Okay. Who is the audience of this pasuk? Okay. Is this only for wealthy and poor people? If so, that's not necessarily within your control. So I want to mention something which I feel like I mentioned before, but I'll mention it again. So one disagreement that Rabbi Moskowitz and I, my Mishlei Rebbe and I had in when we approached pesukim about poverty, it was based on Ayala's observation here, which is that Rabbi Moskowitz said that since wealth and poverty are not within your control, then and since Mishlei is dealing with decision making, which is in your control, then anytime you see Mishlei talk about poverty, you should assume it's talking about poverty that was caused by your foolishness or poverty that can be caused by your foolishness. And then with wealth, same thing, is that it's talking about someone who made their wealth through wisdom, or it's talking about how to make your wealth through wisdom. So that was Ryan Moskowitz's approach, that Mishlei does not deal with wealth and poverty that are beyond your control. I'm fine with that. I've seen pesukim like that. My approach is that it can also be dealing with things that are beyond your control and how to cope with them. You know, like let's say there are things that, let's say like a famine hits, or like the stock market crashes or whatever, you know, the economy, you know, tanks, and you're thrust into a state of poverty and you can't control that. There still might be decisions that you can make, you know. So those are the two. The question's still good in terms of we need to answer it, but methodologically, those are the two approaches I've seen. Okay. Next.
I have a question on the second half of the pasuk.
Yeah.
So actually 2 questions. So my first question on that is, I feel like we have a lot of examples throughout history of people that were poor, like tzaddikim or rabbis, or whoever you want to talk about, that were poor, and they did succeed in life in terms of midos and stuff like that. So that's one question.
Okay.
And the second question is, isn't it obvious that, oh, it kind of contradicts itself. I was going to say, isn't it obvious that the poor people are poor or like impoverished? I'm just confused.
Okay. So no, those are okay. Those are 2 good questions. I thought you were going to go in a different direction. Try asking the same question that you asked, the first of the questions you said, right? Try asking that on the first half also. What would be the corresponding thing for the first half?
For the first half, you're saying like that the wealthy person would have a fortune. Also, why is it that the fortune is his strength?
Okay, let me make sure I understood your first question. Your question is, this is saying that the destruction of the poor is their poverty. Or let's go with our scroll, because I think that fits your question better. Poverty is the ruin of the impoverished. And your question is, but there are people who are poor and it doesn't ruin them.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a parallel question you can ask on the first half? Not just Rivki, anyone. I mean, if you have,
there are rich people whose wealth doesn't save them.
Yeah, is that there are people whose wealth does not protect them. So the question here, this is a classic, is this pasuk true? Okay. Aren't there wealthy people whose wealth does not act as a fortress? Aren't there poor people whose poverty does not ruin them? So that was your first question, right, Rivki?
Yeah, and then also now on the first half, I just don't see the correlation between like his strength and his fortune. Like, what kind of strength is it, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so that's another question. What, in what way, I'm just going to ask it on the entire mashal. In what way is the rich person's fortune a fortress of his strength? Yeah. Okay, what kind of strength? Strength. I'm not typing well today. Yeah. Okay, but then you asked a second question also, which was, isn't it obvious that let's put it this way. When poor people are ruined, isn't it obvious that it's because of their poverty? Is that what you were trying to ask there?
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason why you thought that you were contradicting yourself in asking the questions was because this is what we call a mimanafshach in Gemara, right? Like either way. So mimanafshach, either they are ruined by their poverty, in which case the pasuk is obvious, or they're not ruined, in which case the pasuk is not true. You know, so it's either like not true or it's a redundant. It's just obvious points. Like, you know, either way we have a problem. Okay. Next question.
What does it mean that it's like a fortress of his strength?
Yeah, I typed that and I just moved it. Sorry, yeah. In what way is the rich person's fortune a fortress of his strength? What kind of strength? And what's the metaphor of fortress? I'll add that also. Is that that's the question you're asking?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see that.
That's fine. Yeah. Okay.
Also, like, what's the definition of wealth here? Like, is it
Yeah.
money? Is it
Good
success?
question.
Is it
What is the definition of wealth in this context? Okay, I'm gonna head something off at the pass, okay? Because I know one of you is gonna say this. Okay. I told you last time that we finally are not talking about a pasuk that has to do with knowledge and speech. Okay. There is a whole slew of commentators who say that this pasuk is about knowledge. Okay. And what they say is they quote a bunch of chazals that say that statements of Chazal that say that that the true wealth is knowledge and the true poverty is ignorance. And I'm not saying that that's a bad idea. I'm just saying that like we're not going to go there right now. Okay, we're gonna take this on pshat level as we usually do, unless we're forced otherwise. And I don't think there's anything forcing you to say otherwise here. Actually, sorry. If someone actually, all right, let me take that back. If someone wants to make the argument that you're forced to say otherwise here, then maybe I'll entertain the thought. But I don't think there's anything intrinsic forcing us to take the non-literal interpretation. So I had to plant my flag here. Okay.
Okay, wait. So my question is, even though like I know that this is a true idea, like poor people are like destroyed and rich people have like like strength because of their wealth, like how is that fair?
Okay, so it's funny. There's a let me see if I can quickly show you. This is not answering it. I'm just showing you that someone acknowledges the question here, without showing you any of the. Oh yeah, without showing you any of the ideas. So Rav Moshe Kimchi says, sometimes the wealth will save him from his trouble, from his catastrophe, even though he's not wise. You know, so when I read that, I was like, you know, that's like the complaint that everyone has, is like it's unfair that the wealthy person just like sometimes can get saved when he doesn't like merit it, and it's just because like he has enough money to buy his way out. You know, so in terms of fairness, that is either a Koheles question or an Eov question. If you're going to ask Shlomo HaMelech, he would point you to Koheles because that deals with Koheles's, even though the subject of the book is not why do good things happen to bad people and stuff, but there's a certain type of unfairness that he deals with there, and then obviously Eov deals with unfairness, but Mishlei is not going to deal with that kind of question. It's a good question. It's just that's not the place of Mishlei.
Right. So I guess the underlying thing was like, what is this teaching us? But yeah, that's every pasuk.
Yeah. But you know, we'll ask this here because of what Ayala said, which is it just sounds kind of neutral-ish. It doesn't point to a particular practical application. So what is the practical decision-making idea here? Okay. I think that about covers the main questions. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our minute of thinking, okay? And then because the experiment last week was worth trying, okay? But the experiment last week of hearing out everyone's idea before I respond didn't work because I think it stifled the dynamic of the conversation. We are going to try another experiment, okay? And the experiment is people who only have half-baked ideas are going to have the opportunity to share first. And I'm not doing that as a chesed because Mishlei is not into chesed. Okay, I'm doing that because I think what happens sometimes is if you have a half-baked idea and then you hear someone come along and explain the entire pasuk and it resembles your half-baked idea, sometimes your natural intuition will get overrun by their complete idea. Like you'll be so impressed by their complete idea that you'll extinguish like the thing that you had. So I feel like getting the half-baked ideas out and talking about them before we have someone give theories on the entire thing, that might be a worthwhile experiment to try. Okay.
How would you know when we use you as a to determine whether or not our ideas are half or full?
Oh no, I'm saying like there are people who will often, like when we get to the answer sharing phase, there will be people who will say like, I only have like an answer to question number 2, or like I only have a half-baked idea, you know. So like if you feel that way about your idea, I want to hear from you first. Okay. And then there are people who say like, I think I can explain the whole thing, you know, and then they crack the whole thing. Yeah. Not in those voices, obviously. Okay. All right. So let's take our thinking minute and think. Okay. Alrighty, so any half-baked ideas or answers to particular questions that we'll start off with?
I have what we said for Hon Asher Curious Uzo in the other pasuk.
Okay, I'll when it comes to that, then I'll have you articulate it. We'll see if anyone arrives at it on their own. And by the way, Isaac, just so you know, one of the meforshim here quotes us to one of the meforshim we did on that pasuk and says that idea. So like you're not the only one.
Yeah, I'm tempted to try to explain this pasuk in the same with the same meaning for the first half.
Okay,
In light of that, yeah.
I think that's promising. So I want to hear from other people first, though.
I have 2 tentative thoughts on the whole pasuk, but not sure when I'm supposed to share.
Okay, so I'll
Yeah, me
hold on
too.
to that also.
When do
You
we?
too? Okay. Does
yes.
anyone have any like just small ideas or small observations or steps?
Yeah, I guess I do. So I don't know like what practical advice this would be teaching,
Yeah.
but I was thinking that like the fortune of a wealthy person is the fortress of his strength, meaning that like pretty much when someone is wealthy, like all the good that happens to them, people attribute to their wealth.
Ooh, interesting.
When someone is poor, all the bad stuff that happens to them, people attribute to their poverty, although like it may not necessarily be true. So I don't know, like that doesn't have 2 sides. So I was just thinking that's like a piece of advice to keep in mind when making decisions about.
Yeah. Okay,
observing.
that actually is very good, and it actually explains very well a nuance in the pasuk that we didn't ask about, the fortress of his strength. Okay, I'll add that here. Why his strength? Okay, the natural way to have said it would have been his fortress of strength. Okay, I'm pretty sure that the way that you translate this, maybe there's something I don't know about the Hebrew here. I mean, you see our school translates it as his fortress of strength, but the his is qualifying the strength. So it could be like what I was saying, that that strength here is like success in general, and people attribute it to his wealth, and it creates like a sort of like an aura around him of which I guess is being compared to a fortress. And then the reverse with the poor, you know. So that's an example of a good step, right? So that's not a complete thing that explains everything, but I feel like that's fruitful. Okay, anyone else have a
question on just that little, just a question on that point is that seems like a cool observation to make about like how people interact and view each other.
Yeah.
But what does that imply as far as decision making goes?
Well, that's what Ayala said, that she doesn't know what implication will have for decision making. So
Okay, good.
I can, when I guess when the time is right, I can add on to what Ayala is saying, because my theory is based off of what she was saying.
okay, so you know what? Let's hear it. Yeah, go ahead, Ariel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think to add on, maybe you could say that, you know, what most people they like. Let's take the second half of the pasuk. And I'm going to be using the R Scrolls translation because it's easier in my mind. Like it's just nicer. The flow is just nicer. You know, the poor person, the destruction of the poor person is within his poverty, meaning it's almost like a victim mentality.
Yeah.
You know, like he's using his circumstance to justify his position.
Yeah.
And he's not progressing. I mean, and he won't be able to progress in a positive light. Meaning he's just gonna further his, you know, destruction in his lifestyle, because he will never improve and it's only on a descending track.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Right.
Yeah, that's really good for the second half. Okay, and you got one for the first half based on that also?
Yeah, the first half, it's just it could be the same thing, just on the flip side, meaning like you're an individual who, and we're not talking about money, we're not talking about money. It's just money. We're just talking about the circumstances you're in. You're going to use that as leverage to further your lifestyle in a positive light. Meaning, like, if I am, you know, using my circumstances, and if I always want to, be better at what I do in my life, like, you know, I have to, pivot my mindset into furthering it and getting more of a positive, role in society. Or even if it is money, even if I do want to make more money, well, the question is, well, who am I, in a dorm room, being, able to, come up with a great business idea, like who are you to do that? That's the mentality you shouldn't have. You should have the positive mentality, and just surround yourself with people who can help you out with that.
Okay, good. So this is one of the two ideas that my chavrusa Avi and I came up with. I want to read the Radak and then say the idea we came up with. I'm pretty sure it's exactly the same as what you're saying, but if there are differences, then you'll let me know. Okay, so let's read the Radak, and then we'll take another approach after that. So the Radak says, let's see if I can find him here. So he says, so this first part, I actually prefer to ignore. Okay, didn't quite fit in, but he says, I'll read it anyway. Hon Ashir, he says, Mamun ha'ashir hulahem kekiria nisgava be'es tzara. So the money of the wealthy person is like a fortress with a tall wall at the time of catastrophe. Okay, fine. And then here's the part that I think is like what Ariel said. Mechitas dalim resham, the destruction of the poor is their poverty. Pirusha, its meaning is Kashim sheha osher hula ashir kekirias oz, just like wealth is for the wealthy person like a fortress of strength. Kain haoni hu shever la'ani, so too poverty is a breaking for the ani. And I'm understanding that as a breaking of spirit. Okay, why? He'll say, or why do I understand that? Because he'll say, Ki haoni mad'iv halev, poverty makes the heart despondent, umachalish hakoach, and weakens your energy, umevi ha'adam lihios nechshav leklum, and brings a person to be considered as nothing. Okay, so what's the idea? The idea is, let me go back to the pasuk. So, like Rivki said, it's obvious that that poverty is what ruins the poor person. Okay, yeah, that part's obvious. It's obvious that lacking money will have harmful effects. And it's also obvious that having money will have tangible benefits, but what's not as obvious is the effect of the poverty on the psychological state of the person and how that can keep them in their state of wealth. And I mean, I think it's more common knowledge now, but like when when you see these people who are homeless, it's very easy to like judge the people and say, well, why don't they just go get a job? And like it's the reason why it's easy to say that is because we underestimate the psychological effect of being poor, and how debilitating it can be, and how it can cause them to like change the way that their own self-image and self-worth is, and that can hold them back that can hold them in their poverty and ruin them and destroy opportunities for them and prevent them from making wealth. And the reverse is also true, is that, yeah, it's obvious that when you have money, then that can provide you with good things. But the other thing is that people who are wealthy will have it oftentimes feeds into their sense of self-confidence and assertiveness, and can give them a psychological disposition that actually helps them to make more money, and that can advance them further, and that's an asset that I think people like. People are aware that those who are wealthy, might be more arrogant or whatever, but I don't think they're necessarily aware of like it can be harnessed and used and make people like more able to to try different business ventures and stuff. And I have an example that actually fits both qualities. So I don't know if this has become a minhag in this year, but I feel like I quote from the Tim Ferriss interview every single time. So I heard an interview with him and the guy who invented Netflix. Okay, and the Netflix guy in his youth, those programs for like kids who are like juvenile delinquents, where they like take them out into the wilderness and like they have them like survive, like live in harsh conditions and like rely on themselves and like come to terms with things. It's like a very extremist type thing, So the Netflix founder was a wilderness guide on one of these programs. So like he would be the one who would like follow the kids around and like make sure they don't kill themselves, So when they were training the wilderness guides, they wanted them to experience the type of helplessness that these kids are going to experience when they're in the wilderness. Now, here's the problem is what would be the way to do it? Well, drop them off in the wilderness. But the problem is that they're not going to feel helpless in the wilderness. So what they did was they took these wilderness guides and they dropped them off in in big cities, okay, without any money or like, this was before cell phones, without any money or ID or anything, and said, survive here for 3 days and we'll come and get you afterwards. Okay. So it's kind of like a reverse experiment. So this guy, I forgot his name. What he said is, he said the first day was fine, or not the first day, but like the first, part was fine. And he hung out in a food court and just like would get leftover, like food from people. And then like the mall cops started like getting on his case. So then he's like, okay, fine, I'll just panhandle. Like, how difficult can it be, And so then he said that when the thought actually came up to him of like going to people and asking them for money, he said it took him like over an hour to just work up the courage to go ask someone for money. And then when he did it, he said it was the most demoralizing experience like ever, to have someone like look at you like you're like you're dirt, or even just like not look at you and just not acknowledge your existence. And he said the fact that he himself knew that he wasn't poor and this was just like a temporary scenario, it shocked him how much he felt this way, given the fact that he wasn't actually poor, So you can imagine if you actually have no prospects and you're hopeless and you have no one to turn to, you can imagine how debilitating that would be. And he said that he always kept that with him, and it affected his mentality when interacting with poor people, and like it affected his business, mentality. So that is the point of the pasuk, is that the subject of the pasuk is the psychological impact of the state of poverty on your remaining poor, and the psychological boon, the benefit of the mentality of the rich man in being able to generate wealth. So first of all, before we talk about practical implications, Ariel, is that like along the lines of what you were saying, or is it different?
I think it's the same. I think in the rich man, I'm not like translating it strictly as a rich individual. It's more of like he's like a normal individual, or he could be rich if he wants to break through another ceiling and improve his business. Whereas really anyone who wants to excel in their lifestyle, just break out of their shell, basically.
Right, but the pasuk is talking about a person who is crazy rich.
I think you could apply. I think there's
Can I-
room, for
Could
flexibility.
I maybe merge
Wait, hold on. I just want to hear what Ariel was about to say. Say again, Ariel.
I know Zach will help me out just knowing him. I think that there's room for flexibility. Meaning, I think it could apply in others. You could take the idea and apply it in.
You can definitely apply it elsewhere. But I just want to like, and Zach, you can address this if you want. But like the straight reading of the pasuk is hon means extreme wealth. The extreme wealth of the rich guy is his fortress of strength. That's literally what the pasuk is saying. So yeah, you can apply it to someone who wants to succeed in business who happens to be in a dorm, but like that's an application. That's not what the pasuk is saying,
So I might be able to help Ariel out. He can
Okay,
tell me
go ahead.
whether this you can tell me if it addresses your question, and he can tell me if it stays in line with what he's
sure.
trying to say.
Yeah.
And this was actually one of the two tentative thoughts I wanted to share anyway. So it's good Ariel brought it up, but it could be that this is talking about how to use what you have, and it's saying that wherever you are in the spectrum of wealth, you can either use what you have, you can use the money you have to create more wealth, or you can use what you don't have as a reason to keep on sinking further. So really anybody could see themselves as poor, anyone can see themselves as rich, and it's that choice in your mind of what you decide to focus on that allows you to either gain more wealth or become more poor.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. I guess what I'm trying to think of, so that is a different idea though than what Ariel was saying though, because
No, that's exactly what I wanted to say.
Oh, so that's different than what I'm saying. And let me just state the difference, because I'm saying that it's the psychological state of being wealthy and the psychological state of being poor that can affect your general outlook and your ability to like move forward or can keep you there. But you're saying is it's also mentality, but it's the mentality that you can work with whatever you have in order to advance your state,
So yeah, it's kind of maybe taking your approach and saying that approach isn't necessarily tied to literal wealth. And the reason, like, if you just look at real life examples, is there are millionaires and with hundreds of millions of dollars who feel like they're poor based off of how they look at their money. They can't afford the newest yacht. They can't have a fleet of private jets, and they the way they see themselves is as poor, and that mentality is likely to get rid of their wealth. And you can have someone who's poor who can tap into the psychological phenomenon that you were outlining of a rich person and say like, wow, there's so much I have. I'm born into a country that's the wealthiest in the world, and I'm part of the top 1% of wealth globally. Even if maybe you're not a millionaire, but you can still tap into that mindset and say, I have so much, and use basically it's kind of agreeing with the two psychological phenomenons you're outlining, but saying that there's some measure of control that a person has into tapping into those two alternative psychologies.
Yeah, so that's an interesting idea. I want to contrast it with what I'm gonna say. I didn't fully spell out the practical implications of this, so let me just spell that out and then contrast it with what you're saying, and then Ariel can weigh in terms of which one he likes. So according to the approach I'm taking, what would be the psychological? What would be the practical implications? Practical implications would be that if you find yourself either in either extreme or trending that way, being aware that there's going to be a cognitive bias for good or for bad in the state that you're in. In other words, like if you are poor, that itself is going to affect your decision-making ability in an adverse way unless you take active measures to recognize it. And again, I'm not saying that you necessarily fight it through will. I'm just saying like recognizing it is an important thing. Realizing I might be thinking about money in a certain way because of my state, and similarly, the rich person is gonna have to be aware of his cognitive bias for good or for bad, that like that the confidence I have to make this wealth is coming from the fact that like I view myself as a successful person, or like the overconfidence I have could be coming from the fact that I'm a successful person. And this is where I think the meeting point is between my idea and your idea, is that when Zach was talking about like tapping into that mentality, that is what really makes the real independently, people who generate their own wealth, like that's one of the ingredients that makes them successful, is that they don't let their state of poverty, or the fact that like no one recognizes their ideas, or the fact that like the business looks crazy. Like the Netflix guy was saying, how like the notion that you could beat Blockbuster, and that you can mail DVDs. Like they came up with this idea when DVDs were still like new, and they didn't even have, they wanted to go test their product, and there were no stores that sold DVDs, so they couldn't even like, they had to like buy CDs or something like that, so like, and they were like mocked, but they were they were seeing past the state of poverty that they had, both in terms of their literal poverty and like the poverty of their ideas. So I think that's the difference. Is my practical implication was much more on the guarding against the distortions of thinking on the side of the poverty thing, and your idea seems to be more against the like empowering step of like taking on the mentality of the wealthy person. Is that a fair?
Can I also,
Yeah.
Can I-
Okay. Yeah. Let's go. Ariel, why don't you chime in, then Leia has a question after that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm just not understanding one point. Why, putting aside the pasuk for a second,
Yeah.
the Ho and Usher, why are you limiting it to the rich? Meaning, like,
That's what the pasuk says. The
I know,
extreme
but
wealth
the
of the rich
idea,
person.
but the idea is like it's a universal idea. It's
Yes,
like,
but there's a difference between how you apply the pasuk and what the pasuk is teaching you. Okay, the pasuk is teaching you in extremes. You can apply that to different things, but it's bad methodology to get so enamored by your applications that you think that the pasuk is talking about your applications. And it's an easy mistake to make. And some pesukim are only talking about one application, but like hon means extreme wealth and ashir means wealthy person. And dal is like abject poverty, and resh is either abject poverty or like loss of money, and dalim are poor people. So the burden of proof is on you to say that it's not talking about that.
But also the idea that you're suggesting is much more tied to their actual state, meaning like the way you were saying it is supposed to be a physically rich person or a physically poor person, as opposed to how I was
that is definitely true. Right. Yeah, I don't think that this would really apply equally across the board to people, let's say like middle class people. Like, yeah, to a certain extent, their middle class socioeconomic status like affects the way that they're thinking. But I'm talking about like in the same way that we talk about, let's say, like a slave mentality, how like if you were raised as a slave, your mind just works differently, and like you would never have like the courage to like stand up to your master. That's a rarity. So to a poverty mentality, is that's what the pasuk is talking about.
Which might, I don't know if methodologically, how do you say that word? We can say that this is a reason to go with the approach that I think Ariel were suggesting, which is the fact that this is a chosen mindset that anyone can take upon themselves. So it means that this pasuk applies to everybody, which seems advantageous compared to the pasuk that's.
I've noticed that this is a pattern in your interpretation, Zach, over the last couple of weeks, is that you prefer pesukim that apply to everybody, and that's valiant in the sense that like wanting universality, but I don't think that is. I guess if there's a tension between a closer reading of the pasuk and being guided by what he's directing you towards versus our inclination to make it universal, I would much rather stick to the words to make it the idea specific, and then we can apply it elsewhere. But like again, I say that like if he's talking about certain cases, then like I'll give you another example, right? Because Purim's coming up. Okay, so there are many pesukim that talk about wine. Okay, now I think that you could take a lot of those pesukim, and I think you could definitely extend it to other like addictive substances, and I don't think that's deviating from the pshat of the pasuk. Okay, now I can see us learning a pasuk, and then a person saying, well, this might apply to other addictions as well, such as greed and popularity and stuff. That's very nice, but like you lose the specific idea that he's trying to tell you. And because the whole book of Mishlei, in terms of the way it changes our behavior, is it takes, I've said this before, is you could summarize all of Mishlei in one sentence, which is, who is wise? One who thinks about the consequences of his actions. The problem is that universal, abstract, theoretical ideas don't actually change us. They don't actually move us. The more abstract it is, the less your emotions will actually relate to it. And the whole genius of Shlomo's method is he takes that one abstract principle and he plays it through very particular scenarios, because the particulars are what change your emotions. So that's a second reason why I think that it's prudent to like resist the urge to over universalize the ideas and to bring them out of the particular cases that he designed to impact your emotions. So if we had this pasuk about like, wine, and we extended it to all forms of addictive thinking, we then become lost in this world of true ideas and sensible ideas, but ideas that are so removed from like what impacts our emotions that like it undermines the method of Mishlei. Not the method in terms of interpreting Mishlei, the method of how Mishlei changes our behavior. So that's why I'm very wary of like riding the chariot of universality like into the sunset, because it risks losing like this the specificity that's like part of the method of Mishlei. And again, I'm not criticizing the applications. The wider you can make the applications of the specific idea, the better, because then you can apply them more. But like in interpreting the idea, then I'm cautious. So
to clarify, sorry, I just want to clarify what you were just saying, is that you were just saying that in general, it's not advantageous necessarily, or it's not more advantageous to have a universally applicable idea over sticking with the words, but you weren't necessarily saying that it's weaker in this case, meaning like we had two similar yet different ideas. Were you saying that, or was this coming to say that one is weaker, or coming to say that one wasn't stronger because it was universally applied?
So here I was coming to say that that in general, then it's, let me think how, because I am saying both, but the immediate point was, maybe I'm getting mixed up with in the language of weaker and stronger. Let me just try to state the two again, and then just so we can have it to talk about. I'm saying in the pasuk itself, the fact that it emphasizes extreme wealth of a rich person and poverty of poor people leads me to say it's a better interpretation to say it's talking about those specific cases. That's on a particular level. And then I'm saying a separate thing, which is the trend of how you interpret the pesukim, all things being equal, if you're going to approach it in a way that is less faithful to the words and more universal, or more faithful to the words and less universal, then it's more in line with the method of how Shlomo is trying to change our emotions to go with a more particularized interpretation.
So I want to follow up, ask, what's the difference between the extreme versus like the average poor person in this case? The practical difference.
I think in every society, there's going to be a level of extreme poverty where you have a qualitatively different mentality, and there's definitely strata. Like there's definitely like I read a book earlier in the year, Nickel and Dimed, I always forgot how to say it, where like by Barbara Ehrenreich, where she goes and lives, this is in the 90s, I think, she goes and tries to live on minimum wage for many months. And like she saw that there was a different mentality among people who were living on minimum wage. And that I wouldn't call extreme poverty, but it is, I'd say like the, how would I put it? Shlomo is highlighting the extreme poverty because that's the purest form of the idea, that people who are like in the gutter poor, are debilitated in their thinking because of their poverty, and people who are super rich are in this psychological fortress, because of their wealth. And so that's the case where is the clearest example. But then in the application, I do agree that like you can apply it to different people in the middle in different extents.
So can I?
But this is really the point that Zach made when he was comparing my interpretation to Ariel's, is that the way I'm learning, the idea emerges from the extreme cases.
So can I ask a question in a different way then?
Yeah.
And
I haven't forgotten about you, Leah. I hope you haven't forgotten your question.
No, we're good.
Okay, good.
So now that the pasuk says hon usher, right? And the idea that my question is, so what is it coming to exclude by an average person? Meaning, what is the difference? Because in my mind, I'm still not seeing the difference between the social classes. So I guess my question is, if it's isolating the hon usher, what is the difference?
Because think of all the extremely wealthy people in the think of Jeff Bezos, right? Okay, he is a person who is going to have this extreme confidence and this extreme security in the rightness of his decisions that can actually like become a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of making things happen. I don't think that the average person has that.
Can you explain that one more time?
Yeah. I mean, here's a better example. Look at Elon Musk. I mean, I don't know how much you see, his statements, but like he has this mentality of like I can do anything, or like I started reading a biography of Rockefeller, and like these men changed America. Now, how did they change America? Part of it was the fact that when they became successful, they had this mentality of I can like one of the things, I haven't read this part of the biography yet, but like apparently like I guess Rockefeller was responsible for uniting medicine, like making like I guess it used to be a thing where like every single different doctor and like school that studied medicine had their own like results, and no one shared anything. And he was like, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to make this happen, and like the wealthy person who has had so much success from his plans has this mentality of like, I'm just going to make this happen. Or Steve Jobs is another example of like just the supreme confidence that comes with the success itself enables them to succeed because they have such a belief in their success, and also can prevent them from failing in a certain sense because it makes them immune to these doubts that would paralyze the person who's like the average state of wealth. And that's a liability also, by the way. Like, but I'm saying this pasuk is not talking about the liability; it's talking about the strength.
Fine. So can I ask you a follow-up question then? It sounds like so. Hold on. So you said something that can really be also a meaning like this. Okay, like Menachem Begin, he wasn't a very wealthy guy, but he also changed Israel. I mean, like he had that same exact framework as this cannot go wrong, otherwise we wouldn't have had the old city. Meaning, right. Like he had that mentality, like I have to do whatever is necessary to make sure that Israel is that Israel is in the Jewish people's hand.
Right.
I mean, but
that's not what the pasuk is talking about. The pasuk is talking about that specifically from wealth and from poverty.
Well, can I
know
defend...
that's what I'm trying to understand.
That's what I'm trying to explain, is that the pasuk, the subject of the pasuk is it's examining a benefit from wealth and a detriment from poverty that people do not typically pay attention to, which is the impact on your psyche and the ability to make more wealth and the tendency to stay poor. And so this is not to the exclusion of, there are also brave soldiers, and there are also like daring thinkers. There's lots of areas of confidence and lots of areas of like bad self-image. But what this is talking about is wealth.
I want to say that maybe when you talk about extreme wealth and extreme poverty, so it's much more than just the mental state of the person. It's because the person has money to invest. The person other people trust him because of his wealth. You know, so the person can be super confident, but if he doesn't have the money to, you know, to do anything, then he's stuck in a lot of cases.
Right.
So I think that's why I don't know who the other people speaking, but they tend to go more for the mentality, because I wonder if we just state a fact, is the pasuk. I mean, with Lomdeha just want to state a fact. If you're going to go that way, then it does teach you a lesson that if you have super confidence but you don't have the money, maybe you should also be cautious.
Right.
And I run into, you know, we actually I advise people on different things, and we always warn them, you don't have a lot of money, so you know, you have a great idea, but you're gonna be at a big disadvantage.
Right.
Just the practical reality.
And that's a good application to this also, which like what Naomi's saying is keeping this tied to the phenomena that are discussed in the pasuk, which is extreme wealth and extreme poverty, you know, and again, that's why I'm saying, like, whatever idea we come up with should be tied to that, because that's what the pasuk is talking about. And if someone wants to talk about courage, he would just talk about courage. Like, he can do that. He wrote the book. Like, he can talk about more universal topics. The fact that he's talking specifically about extreme wealth and poverty, to me, is significant. I just want to, I feel so bad because I put Leah on hold. Leah, what was your question?
Okay, it wasn't a question. It was like a small point.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I feel like it's just like a small point that could add to, like, I think either interpretation, which is that that both of the extremes in the pasuk focus on, like, the physical, like something physical is like affecting the person. So the wealth of the wealthy person is causing a strength, and like the physicalness of the poverty is what's making the destruction.
Okay, good. So on that, the one the interpretation, the commentator who takes it that way is Rabbeinu Yonah. Very short commentary here that I just want to read this. This is a second idea. Okay, he says, "Hon asher kirasudo." So the wealth of the fortune of the wealthy person is the fortune of strength. Divir behololus v'sichlos b'nei adam. He says the subject of the pasuk is the foolishness of people, the foolishness and ignorance of people. Okay, how so? Sha'ashir boteach ba'oshro. The wealthy person trusts in his wealth. V'hadal yare machmas ratio, and the poor person is afraid on account of his poverty. V'nimtzeis kavanas ha'ashir b'bitachon v'ha'ani b'yira chet echad. Turns out that the wealthy person's security in his wealth and the poor person's fear, it's one sin that they're doing. Okay, he's using the word sin, obviously not halachically. V'avla echad lahem. There's one distortion that both of them have. Ushnehem shagu. Both of them are erring. Ki ein hachayim v'hatov b'sivas ha'osher. Because life and good are not dependent on wealth. Okay, so he's taking that observation point, the observation that Leah was making, which is that, you know, it's talking about the physical impact of the wealth on the wealthy person and the physical impact of the poverty on the poor person. And according to Rabbeinu Yonah, both of them are wrong. It's saying that that's not really what is going to give you a good life, because there are people who are extremely wealthy and who are either miserable, or they are, you know, they could lose their wealth, or they're not secure like they imagine. And then there are people who are extremely poor who are happy and content. This is, like, I guess, getting to the point that Rivki was making also. So it's highlighting a mistake that both of them make, and it's saying that they're the same mistake. Both of them are making the mistake of thinking that your socioeconomic status is somehow related to your happiness or the goodness of your life, you know. And this also relates to the point Isaac wanted to say, which we got from chapter 18. So this is quoted by the Shadal. So Shadal says, the wealth of the wealthy person, he says, Hanachon Kamosha Pirish Rav Moshe Kimchi Lamata Yudches Yud Aleph Hon Ashir Miduma Be'enav Kiryas Oz. That the wealth of the wealthy person, he imagines in his own eyes that it is like a fortified city. And he thinks he'll be saved in it. Or if you look at the pasuk, the way the Ralbag interpreted it, on that pasuk, he has security that will be for strength for him, according to his thoughts and his perceptions, but it's not really true. And the poor person also is that he thinks that becoming poor will ruin him, but that's also not really true. That's not really, if he thinks that that's true, then he doesn't really know what what true success is, which or he doesn't really know what money is. That money is a means to an end. And yeah, having money helps, and lacking money will, prevent you from taking care of your needs. But that's not where your success as a human being lies, or your happiness lies.
Wait, can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
I guess actually the whole pasuk.
Sure.
Would you say that this would have a different implication if you were born into either wealth or poverty?
Good question. So that depends on two things. One is, it depends on if you read the pasuk, if you learn the word resh to mean that you became poor. So then you'd have to differentiate. Then the pasuk would only be making a statement about becoming poor. And I think that fits in better with the interpretation I just read. That when people, not better, it fits in. I don't know. Like, I think when a person loses a bunch of money, they will be prone to feeling that, like, okay, that's it, my life is over. Or when they gain a bunch of money, they'll be prone to feeling like, oh, that's it, like my life is made, and like this would be warning against that, according to that approach. And then according to the approach I said earlier, I think a kid who was raised, according to my idea, a kid who was raised in wealth might have some of those benefits of like the confidence and the certain like brazenness that the wealthy person has, that could be an asset to success, and the reverse for the poor person. And in fact, one of the examples of this might be Moshe Rabbeinu, that the question is raised, well, why was it important for Moshe Rabbeinu to be raised in Paro's palace? So there's different answers given. One of the answers is, if he was raised in a slave mentality, then like he wouldn't have been able to challenge the king of the greatest empire. If he were raised with his brethren, they would view him differently. But the fact that like he was not raised, they'd be like that, that was that Moshe kid who was like running around. The fact that like he was raised in the palace gave him access to the best education. But then I think another thing is, he's going to have a certain type of mentality that people who are raised in the royal palace have. Look at another example of this is Yeshayahu versus Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu was a poor kid who had to go and like say these rebukes to people, and Yeshayahu was like essentially royalty, and had like didn't have to worry about that same level of his self-image. So I think according to my idea, then the psychological state could come even from being raised in that environment. Although I think if you made your own wealth, there are different dimensions that you get in terms of your confidence.
Yeah, actually, I agree with you. It kind of makes sense now.
Okay.
It's not the process. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, no, I'm glad you kept on asking. And again, just to be clear, I'm not rejecting the ideas that you and Zach were saying, and I'm not even rejecting the interpretation of the pasuk. I just think that it is erring on the side of fleeing from the words too much.
It sounds like you're just saying that like you really see most of this psychological phenomenon in the usher and in the poor person.
Yeah,
on both extremes.
And you got to remember also that Mishlei is not talking about exceptional cases. Mishlei is talking about the general trend. Like, there are definitely exceptional cases where you have someone who's poor and has this mentality, and like breaks out of the poverty thing. And that's not a disproof to the pasuk, and that's not a disproof to interpretation. But the fact is that a lot of the homeless people on the streets are kept there because of the mentality of poverty and the mentality of homelessness.
Can I ask a question about the fortress idea, unless it's already been addressed? So it's like, if you look at the translations, it's fortress, citadel, fortress, city. That's a protection that wealth gives you also. So like, you don't have to worry about lawsuits or copyrights or anything, whereas a poor person wouldn't have that protection.
Yeah, that is definitely true. I heard a wealthy person say, any problem that you can solve with money is not a problem, and this is a person who has a lot of wealth, and like, you know what? If you have the money to say that, then you're right, and you will be able to stay the course and like just whatever problems come your way you'll be able to like solve with money, and you'll be able to stick to your vision. And if it's a good vision, it'll have much more success. And people who are not that wealthy just don't have the luxury to do that. So yeah, it could be a literal protector as well.
I was just mentioning that because of the fortress image, and
Yeah, that's a good point.
Also, another point that I was making about
Yeah.
the physical aspect of it is that in the pasuk, it's like obvious kind of that like wealth makes a person wealthy and strong.
Yeah.
But also the fact that it's money. Money is obviously like, it doesn't last forever. It's something physical that goes away.
Right.
So like the havamina of like people, they think that like there's a security in it
Yeah.
because they're wealthy, or they're poor and like they don't have money, but because it's something physical, it's constantly fleeting and changing and fluctuating.
Yeah, that is a good point, and that is a theme in pesukim and Mishlei about money, just the fleeting nature of it, that it can fly like if there's a pasuk where it says it flies away like a bird, or a lot of pesukim like that, and yeah, that supports the notion, like the Rebbeinu Yonah that I read, that it's his fortress of strength, meaning it's in his mind that it's going to provide security, but in actuality, it could vanish tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask a methodology question?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I've noticed the theme tonight is like, if you can say the word methodology, then you got the right to ask the question. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So when you were talking about how it's important to not like read the applications into the pasuk and like just stick with what it's saying,
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering, so say like you're neither of those people, like not like in poverty and not in extreme wealth, so then
Yeah.
when I read it, should I think to myself, oh, like I should then look for these applications, or should I just be like, oh, I'm just appreciating this idea as an idea?
I think you should definitely look for the applications, because you may be in one of these categories one day. And this, I'll give the analogy. I got to, give the classic Rabbi Moskowitz analogy of the acrobat on the airplane, which was that I guess he saw, it must have been a TV show of, those. There's a name for this type of acrobat, but there were people who used to do like acrobatics and like gymnastics on the wings of a plane while they were flying.
Wing walker. It's a wing walker, I think.
Wing walker. Okay, fine. So he saw, Ryan Moskowitz saw an interview with one of them, and they said like, what do you do if there's if like something goes wrong, So this I think it was a woman. This woman said like, what she does is she practices on the wing on the ground and tries to think through every single possible thing that could go wrong, and comes up with like protocols for what to do, and then rehearses the protocols, so that when she's in, because she knows that when she's in the air, she's not going to be able to think about it on the spot. So hopefully like her training will kick in. So same thing when you see a pasuk that doesn't address a scenario in your own life right now, thinking through in practical terms opens those channels in your mind and sort of like prepares you for in the event that this thing actually happens to you. And then hopefully the fact that you thought it through earlier, you'll react differently in the situation. Or if you don't react differently, you'll at least have ideas about what you can do, So I think it is important to take it through to practical implications, even if it's not relevant to you on the surface.
Can I follow up with another?
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Zach?
Just following up with this methodology trend.
Sure.
So just talking about general, like universal approaches versus sticking with the words, it kind of troubles me to leave the application so narrow, because it seems like the very nature of this book and his writings right now are supposed to be general pieces of wisdom that are useful for everybody, meaning like that's what Proverbs are.
Right.
So if we say there's a proverb that just talks about people who are obese or anorexic, but not anyone else, that's not really general knowledge anymore. It's kind of like a bizarre thing to find in a book of general pieces of knowledge. So that I think that's why I am very tempted always to figure out how this applies as a general piece of knowledge as opposed to something that's just an extreme application.
Right. So I'm not challenging that the application can be broad. I'm saying that the interpretation should stick to the words. And here, yeah.
So jumping off that, would you be okay with this understanding of your explanation that there are extreme people, there are people who are extremely wealthy who get the benefit of an enhanced psychological mindset toward, you know, their endeavors, and there are people who are extremely poor, and therefore that inhibits them from psychologically on their endeavors. And so therefore, because we can acknowledge that both of those are true, an individual can try to model their mind after the psychology that will help them. And so therefore, like, to take Ariel's example of Begin, you know, like, he might have been a person who successfully did that and noticed, oh, these wealthy people are successful because I'm not saying he did this consciously, but he theoretically could have. And he sees that these people are, you know, successful because of their mental approach. So he models his mind and his approach after that. And that's what this pasuk is saying. It's saying, like, here's a literal observation, but now the way to use that is for the regular person.
I mean, I don't think that fits into my interpretation, simply because I don't think you can artificially do that. I don't think you can. I don't think that you can tap into the mentality of the rich person. And
It's
to
actually
address, yeah.
It's actually like the whole point of the book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
It's like one of the things that he's like really like focusing on is putting yourself in the mentality as if you already have the money. So like I think to give yourself this mentality.
Okay, so you agree with Zach? Yeah, I'm not convinced, but I'll tell you though, going back to what you're saying, Zach, I don't think the fact that this doesn't describe, and this might also just what Yael is saying, like, who's to say that this is telling you about, like, that you are the rich guy or the poor guy? I interact with poor people all the time, and this is a very important thing for me to have in mind when I interact with the poor people, and I interact with rich people also, you know, and like, knowing that this is going on under the surface, like, certainly with poor people, I mean, like, I think we've done pesukim about tzedakah. Actually, I can't remember now, but like, when you're interacting with poor people, then realizing, realizing what state, we've definitely done that. Realizing what state they're in does have a practical role in terms of decision making. And when you are interacting with rich people as well, knowing that this, like we were saying earlier, someone was saying earlier about the like this aura that rich people, like Ayala was saying, like that people ascribe the success to them because they're rich, realizing that like look what happened. Look what happens with Donald Trump, right? I mean, that a lot of the reason why many people voted for him in the first election was because he had this aura of a rich, confident businessman, you know, and like, a lot of people thought that would just carry on over into whatever area he put his mind into, but that was really like a trap, you know. Similarly, there is a this affects the way that we view wealth and poverty. Like, a person might take a risky business move and say, well, the worst that can happen is that I can become poor, and then like, I'll just work my way back up again, not factoring in the fact that when they become poor, then there's going to be a different psychological factors that they'll have to contend with. Again, like that book I read with Nickel and Dime, that was what happened to her, is like, she knew theoretically that it might be, she might have to like make less money one day, but like, actually being in that circumstance was an eye-opener. Another application is in terms of our desire. We desire wealth and we fear poverty, and this is pointing out that we're missing something about that, is that one of the reasons why you should fear poverty is not just because of the fact that you can't put food on the table. It's the fact that it actually will change your psyche. Like, there are lots of applications that come from the extreme cases, And I'm totally fine with saying that he's teaching us those cases. And I'm going to suggest an exercise, and this is not, I don't mean this as homework, but like flip through Mishlei, an English translation of Mishlei, chapters 10 through somewhere anywhere between 10 and 29, and take note of how you have many pesukim that are very universally stated and pesukim that are hyper particularized, and that's by design, you know. And I think again that the overarching methodology point I want to be the takeaway is like to respect that, to respect what he was trying to direct you to in terms of the particulars, and not let your desire for universalizing, you know, get removed from the words, remove yourself from the words. Yeah.
I try to clarify about what I was saying from
Sure.
thinking Growich. I wasn't saying that was the idea of the pasuk. I was just
Yeah.
saying that the phenomenon that Zach was talking about was reflected in that book.
Right.
That
Okay. Yeah. But and again, and just to stay clear, I don't think that that's what Shlomo is telling us by this. I think I agree with the idea. I think that is a good, you know, is a real phenomenon. I don't, that does not sit well with me in terms of saying that the reason why Shlomo is telling us this fact is so that you put yourself into the mindset of the person who is extremely wealthy. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of ideas, a lot of methodology tonight, stuff to think about. And I'll leave you with one idea in terms of, I mentioned that a lot of them, surprising number of the meforshim, because of the previous pesukim, take this to be about knowledge. You know, that it's not talking about wealth, and it's not just because of the previous pesukim, it's because of the question that this is not true, that wealth does not give you security, you know, whereas wealth does not give you protection, whereas knowledge does. And poverty in money doesn't ruin you, but poverty in knowledge does. So I think you can, you know, I think it's interesting to think about all the ideas we were saying tonight if you just plug in knowledge and then see, you know, what the results are for that, you know, because a lot of meforshim do take that. And there's some meforshim who explicitly take both approaches. They say, well, if this is talking about actual wealth, here's the idea. And if it's talking about wealth in knowledge, here's the same idea, but applied to knowledge. Like, for example, according to the way I'm saying it, is people who are like, I've noticed this with in teaching honors classes and non-honors classes, or, you know, grade level classes. What's the biggest difference is that the kids who are in the non-honors classes oftentimes will feel, they've been told for years that they're stupid. They're not told that, but that's how they feel, and they just won't try to like, I do this, you know, my students will know this, but like, you know, in my study skills class, then, you know, the first thing I would do on the first lesson is I would do this trick. You know, I would write 30 terms on the board. Like each students would come up with like a random object, right? Random object, person, place, whatever. You know, like these 35 terms on the board. And I would say, what if I told you that I'm going to teach you a method where you will be able to memorize all 30 terms in order in 10 minutes, you know? And they're like, no way, that's not possible, you know? And then I teach them the method, and then I have them practice it, and then they try it out and they do it, you know? But the biggest difference is that in the honors classes, the kids will try and they'll master it. And in the grade level classes, the kids will give up. And I see this year after year after year. And it's not just there, but like, if you think you are poor, you will actually be less successful in gaining knowledge, because you're defining yourself as dumb, and you're defining yourself as like not capable.
But aren't you straying from the framework you set up though? Because now you're saying that it's somewhat of a choice, meaning like they weren't really dumb, but they were choosing to be dumb. But if you were to stick with your literal approach, then you would have to say that them being really stupid is what helps them stay stupid, so to speak.
I unfortunately think that the damage is done in most of these cases. Like, and in the same way that I would agree that you can have a rare individual who breaks out of it, then like you can have a kid who was raised to think that they're dumb realize that like they can make headway. But I do think that like, you know, in in many cases, like the damage is done by the parents and teachers from beforehand.
I mean, you could, I mean, my company, they created a special course on on educating, like the next generation. And a lot of it has to do with breaking out of that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's starting to be recognized.
Just for the sake of the
But
course.
but your practical application cannot be breaking out of that mindset because you're saying it's fixed. So what is the practical application there?
Right. So I guess I don't know what the practical application is for that interpretation. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, you don't think they can break out of that mindset?
Oh no, I'm saying that you can, but it's very hard. It's very, again, I'm just speaking in especially in the statistical pool that I've seen, like in terms of like the 10 years of teaching high school and seeing like lots of cases like this, hundreds of cases like this. Like it's very hard to work against the upbringing.
Right. Yeah. A lot of that course, like the first, they dedicate a lot of hours just on the differences between the poor mentality and the rich mentality, and successful mentality and the not successful mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I think the closest thing I've seen to it is the Josh Waitzkin, who was, if you've seen the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, he was like a very, very young chess champion, like national, international, whatever. So he speaks about, actually, maybe he was quoting Carol Dweck of, there's two ways to think about intelligence. There's like, I forgot what he called them. There's like, where you envision it as like a fixed quantity. And then there's where you view it as based on effort. So I think, to answer your question, Zach, I think the dumb kids and the smart kids who have the fixed entity mentality, I think it's very hard to change that, and what happens is even the smart kids will be very, very successful as long as they're succeeding. And then when they hit a brick wall, then they give up, because to them, it's like evidence that they're not smart or like that they don't want to be confronted with that. But if the key would be, if you had someone with I think it was growth mentality, I forgot what they call it. They had a thing where you realize where you realize from an early age what you're saying, which is that the effort and how much, like how you frame it can impact your success, then you can pull out of these ruts more easily.
It does sound, as you're describing this more, it does sound more and more to me like motivational psychology. The mindset of a succeeder or achiever versus an underachiever, and how they what they're willing to try, not try, and how motivated they feel.
Yeah.
And so like it definitely does sound very similar to that, although I do think that even in motivational psychology, the idea is to ultimately use that to control one's own mindset and motivation.
Right. Yeah, I hear. I just want to go back to one point. By the way, I forgot to do what I usually do and end this year officially before the year's officially ended. Sorry, I lost track of time. But going back to what you said earlier about this is not a universal point, but like this pasuk also, we have to remember that when Shlomo was writing back in his day, like extreme poverty and extreme wealth were not nearly as extreme as they are now, meaning that you could become extremely poor by having like a bad harvest one year, and extreme wealth was not like billionaires, So like even in the extremes in his society, I think were like much more within arm's reach from the populace that like than it is in our society, again, I'm not saying that addresses the larger methodological points. I'm just saying in terms of this pasuk,
Very interesting. Yeah. Now that I guess class is officially over, I wanted to address the other answer that I had. The reason why I didn't bring it up earlier was just because I think it was covered already based off of what I think Leah and the commentary was saying.
Sure.
But I was thinking that it's kind of like a caution and a comfort. It's a caution to the wealthy person, saying like your wealth is just wealth, so don't get too caught up in it, and a comfort to the poor person, saying your poverty is just poverty.
Right.
And I almost thought it's kind of like saying like a person with a Rolex is a person with a Rolex. It's like saying it in that way makes you think like, okay,
that's good. That's good. Yeah.
There's no biggie. It's just like have a Rolex. So that's kind of one of the other
Oh yeah, I hear that. That's a good approach. Also, yeah, that definitely dovetails with the Rabbeinu Yonah of the people getting too caught up in the notion that your wealth, your financial status is what actually matters. Yeah.
Wait, I know that it's late, but can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. So I know we keep talking about Pirkei Avos in this shiur. I don't know why it keeps coming up, but I was just wondering. Okay, so this really reminds me of the Mishnah about like don't believe in yourself until the day that you die, because I feel like it's like kind of the same vibes, at least for like what the Radak said, like his idea or interpretation of this pasuk. So would you say like the only difference is, because I'm really trying to like differentiate what both authors are saying. So would you say that the real difference is that in Pirkei Avos, that's more about like character traits and like, I guess what you can do, and this is more about like your status in the economy?
I don't know if I follow your question, because when you say in Pirkei Avos, like that idea that you just quoted is like a completely different idea. Like they're not addressing the same thing.
Because I feel like they're similar in this sense that like we seem to be reading this pasuk as like a mindset thing, like mindset attached to wealth.
It is mindset attached to wealth, yeah.
So I'm drawing a parallel between that, because it is largely talking about mindset, and then that Mishnah, because I feel like, unless I just totally miss
That
this,
Mishnah, I mean, that Mishnah is a completely different idea in my mind. I don't know if you're understanding that Mishnah.
that idea then.
That idea, don't believe in yourself until the day you die, is saying that there's a mistake to think that there is a real me, and thinking like this is who I truly am, and like the examples that they gave in that Mishnah, or the meforshim gave on that Mishnah, is like the Yochanan the Kohen Gadol, who said, who was a Kohen Gadol for 80 years and then he became a heretic, and the mistake is thinking that you have a certain character trait or a certain idea that like is the real me, and like, oh, I might like make these mistakes, but like the real me doesn't change, and like that whole idea of a real me is a fantasy. There's no real you. You are what your decisions make you into. I don't see any connection between that idea and this idea. So maybe think about it and like
I feel like I just have to think about.
Yeah. I'm seeing like zero connection, other than maybe the idea of like things change, and like that doesn't necessarily affect you, but like I feel like I'm just totally not seeing whatever connection you're intuitively seeing there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also, I know
I can give you if you remind me on WhatsApp, I can send you my write-up of that idea if you want to read it again, because
yeah, that would be good. Yeah. Okay, thanks. I was also just going to ask, can you just again clarify like the first half of the pasuk according to the Radak's interpretation, because I feel like I'm not seeing it in the words of the pasuk.
Yeah, that the extreme wealth of the wealthy person is his fortress of strength, or the fortress of his strength, meaning having wealth actually makes him feel strong and protected, and I'm saying that the impact of that is that actually keeps him wealthy, or it helps him make more wealth. And the poverty of the poor person is their ruin, which means that the fact that they are poor actually impacts their mind in a way that ruins them, that keeps them poor or makes them more poor.
Can I also get the article, by the way?
Oh yeah, sure.
Also, I was just gonna ask, are there any meforshim? At first I was thinking Rashi, but I know Rashi really leans more towards Torah, but I was wondering if any meforshim speak about like Hashem in this pasuk, because I think that would be really interesting.
Not that I saw. It's possible that I missed it. Let me see in the ones. I mean, they talk about Hashem in terms of trusting in Hashem. Like for example, hold on here. Who is this? The Meiri. He says the same idea that the Rabbeinu Yonah did, only he says it about trusting in Hashem. He says the Efshar she'akol ba lahayir la'adam lasum bitchona bakel. So this it could be that this is all telling you to put your trust in God. Now, I don't think this is a good interpretation because the pasuk doesn't say Hashem, okay? But I see where he's coming from. He says, "V'lo b'davar acher," and not in anything else. Lachein lo yivtach ha'ashir ba'ashro, v'lo yidag ha'ani b'anyo. So this is where it sounds like Rabbeinu Yonah. Therefore, the rich person should not trust in his wealth, and the poor person should not trust in should not be worried about his poverty. Ki hakol talui b'ratzon hakel. Everything is dependent on the will of God. And this goes also to like Leah's point about how wealth is fleeting. And then he says here, he gets it from the next pasuk. That's where he's getting it from. Okay, so which we haven't done yet. And I actually didn't look at the next pasuk because I didn't want to like affect our interpretation. But then he says, "Hon asher kirezuzo klomar shu boteach bo k'migdal oz." He trusts in it like a tower of strength. V'haresh yavo beresho harash yavo beresho v'doagalav. The poor person will be afraid of his poverty and be worried about it. Ushneim toim, and both are making a mistake. Ki hakol lefi ratzon hakel. Everything is according to the will of God. And then he quotes the next pasuk for next week, which is where he gets it from. So they connect it to God in that way. But I don't recall people connecting it to God in other ways. Possible I missed it, but yeah. I mean, and it's not surprising because the pasuk doesn't talk about God, you know.
Who's your favorite Mishlei again? Random question.
I have a couple. I mean, so I prepare for this year typically with the 11th grader, Avi Kessler in Seattle, and then occasionally I'll prepare a difficult puzzle with Ken Sinclair. But we don't do this one regularly. Yeah. And my other caboose is Rabbeinu Yonah, and the other one's Meiri, and the other one's Mesisto. Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's any way to, because in the beginning Ariel pointed out that it's the same word that we had, and the destruction was the same word that we had. So I don't have anything real, but it's just like wondering if, like, you know, talking about one's poverty, because they were talking about talking, a fool talking, you know. So I wonder if there's some kind of thing
that is interesting. Yeah, I mean, once Ariel pointed it out, I mean, especially now that I see that there are, you know, that there are people who learn this one along with the last two, you know, the people who learn all about knowledge and use the same word of destruction, then yeah, it's not unreasonable that that we could.
Wait, how did you learn it again?
I just didn't notice that it was the same word. I don't know why. I just didn't notice it was the same word. I also translate as destruction. But I just, in my mind, it just was completely different than, you know, I think also because the last pasuk we did was like the imminent destruction. Imminent destruction was like a thing that will happen to you. And this was describing a present scenario, like their poverty is their destruction. So like all of the line of thought we were saying yesterday was like, well, what could happen as a result of the fool? And it was like bad stuff happening to him. So I think that I just was thinking that it just didn't occur to my mind when I was envisioning what was happening to the poor person, you know?
Yeah, I'll look at the alkali and see like what the definition of it is.
Okay, sure. All right, this is way past my bedtime now. I think I'm gonna call it quits for tonight.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll send you guys the article.